They wanted retaliation, and they got it. Out of everything on it, that was what got our attention, was the eyes. They knew it was a monster and it could throw rocks. A lot of guys quit.
Hey guys, this is Lance here with Monster 911. So it's so good to see you guys again. It has been a while. I'm sorry for my absence. It was not expected. I had some health issues, but I won't get into the details, but I'm doing so much better. I'm doing great, and I am so excited to be back giving you the interviews and interesting things coming this 2025. So I'm just walking down my drive this afternoon, beautiful day, and I wanted to start getting some things ready for the next comeback show of this year before it ends. But before I do that, I just want to thank you guys. You've been reaching out, asking where I'm at. In fact, you've been asking on other podcast shows where I've gone, and so I do appreciate your prayers and concerns. It's really helped. I'll just let you know that. It definitely helped. So I was restricted for about a year, but now I'm back, full health, all is well. So I want to touch on a couple things, and I need your opinion. I need your comments. First off, we're going to continue with the same style of interviews that you're used to. I started the channel in 2017 as Cryptid Brothers. I changed the name later after a few years to Monster 911. And so you're going to get the same style from me that you're used to. And secondly, I'm going to pepper in a kind of a docu-style of show in which I actually go on location, I camp, and I'm doing interviews with guests at various locations. And so you let me know. In fact, the show you're about to watch will be very similar to this docu-style of interviews. Let me know what you think. Thirdly, I've moved the podcast show from a building that I had out to the side of the house to in the house. It's much more comfortable now, and it's much more quieter. So it's a little cramped, but that's okay. I think it's going to add a little bit better to the sound quality for the interviews that I do. But the ultimate goal is to have a podcast studio built within the next year or two. So that's the ultimate goal there. And the last thing that I will say is that I have been invited by a film company to shoot a new TV series in the UK. And many of you know that I've been on the Travel Channel before, which was an honor. I did not expect it, but I learned so much. I got to go to Alaska, and that was just an amazing trip, an amazing event and episode for me. But I've been asked by that same film company to shoot a show possibly in the UK that involves mysteries and creature encounters and all kinds of paranormal things that's going on in the UK, or that has gone on. And so they want me to travel around, go to abandoned castles, ancient cemeteries, remote forests, and just check out some of the mysteries that have encapsulated or that are currently going on in the UK. Let me know if that would be something of interest to you to watch on TV or on a video platform such as this. So give me your 2 cents on that. I really need to know that. And that's really it. I'm excited to get back with interviewing people. I still have a load of people that's still calling me. I appreciate that. I'm traveling around, as you'll see, investigating so many places in Oklahoma and outside of Oklahoma. Again, I've missed you. I appreciate your prayers and concern. And as always, my mission is to help those that need a voice and to let them know what the truth is. And that is that we are not alone when in the wilderness. Enjoy the show, guys.
It was in 1949, the year I was right at 9 years old. And I lived 2 miles north of Kiefer. And we lived in a oil field camp. Texaco had a refinery up there. And there was a lot of houses that belonged to the Texaco, and they'd rent them out to the people. Anyway, we lived there, and so what brought all this about? My dad's an avid quail hunter. Okay. So him and the neighbor, they go quail hunting every morning. And so they went quail hunting one morning, and the guy that hunted with my dad, his name was Tom. Well, Tom was about 100 yards out in front of Dad for some reason. I don't know. Dad was trying to kick up a covey of birds out of some plum thicket. But anyway, the dogs run into a plum thicket. We had 2 bird dogs. They run into the plum thicket, and they got into a fight with something. Well, the dogs come running out, so Tom went running in. And he seen this big monkey, and the big monkey run up the tree, and he shot it and killed it. Well, Dad got up there and seen what he'd killed, and Dad told him that he really screwed up bad. And Tom said, "Why?" Well, Dad told him, he said, "That's not a monkey, that's a booger." I don't think the term Bigfoot hadn't even surfaced yet.
Okay.
And I don't know about Sasquatch, but at different parts of the country, some of them in Arkansas call them wood boogers, and they got all kinds of names for them. But down in that portion of Oklahoma, my dad always had them, known them as boogers. You know, it was a young one, and if it had been a full-grown one, they couldn't have drug it. You know, but it was a young one. And they drug it up to the house, and Tom had some calves out in his barn, so they brought it over and hung the body in our barn, and they tied ropes around its wrist and hung it up in the rafters. And it was in the morning when this happened. Well, we wasn't but about 400 or 500 yards from the refinery. Well, word got out that we had a big monkey hanging in the garage. A lot of people come down and looked at it. And
like, how many do you think?
Oh, probably 15, 20 people.
Oh, wow.
Because I remember like 7 or 8 people there at one time. And they done that all day, just drifting in and out, you know, coming and looking at it. Because that was a big thing, you know.
Sure.
And so that night, the next morning we got up and it was gone. So you could tell by looking at the rope. The rope was about as big as my thumb, probably a 5/8 diameter rope, and it was a good rope. It was an old well rope, but it was still good and strong. Anyway, whatever come in that night got a hold of the rope and just pulled them in two, just like that. And of course it was gone. So the next day, Tom asked my dad, he said, "What do you think got it?" And my dad said, "Well, I think the mother come and got it during the night." And Dad told him, he said, "We're going to have a lot of trouble out of this for you killing it." So anyway, trouble started, you know. So about 2 days later, my mother had ulcers, and back then it was hard to treat ulcers, so she had to drink a lot of goat milk. So one of our milk goats come up missing. And what they'd done, they'd walked up there and picked it up over the fence. The gate hadn't been open. They didn't crawl out or nothing. It was just picked up over the fence. And anyway, they wound up in a period of probably a month and a half. They got 4 or 5 goats. And goats was expensive back then, especially milk goats.
Sure.
And Dad raised game chickens. We had a bunch of game chickens killed. They would just step on them and pancake them. They wouldn't take nothing off of them and eat it. They had them tied on strings like you tie chickens out in the yard.
Sure.
And they'd run to the end of the string, and that Sasquatch would put his foot down on it and just pancake it. And they'd come through about once a week, and they killed 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, you know. And we raised rabbits. We probably had 250, 300 rabbits.
Oh, wow.
And Dad sold them to the restaurants and stuff, and as frying rabbits. So we lost a bunch of rabbits, and Tom. Anyway, the dogs, they come up missing about 2 or 3 days later. We kept the dogs pinned up because you ruin a good bird dog, you know, if you let him run loose and chase rabbits and stuff. So Tom brought his old dog over, and Dad let his dog out, and they run together. They was buddies. So the first place they headed was down towards that plum thicket, or that persimmon thicket, you know.
Okay.
So didn't think nothing about it, and a couple of hours went by and they didn't come back. So Dad and Tom went to looking for them, and they never did find them. They never
Really?
did find the dogs.
This was about 2 or 3 days.
Yeah. So the booger got the dogs, and he got the goats, and got the chickens and rabbits, and so Tom was feeding out 2 calves, and they'd go between 500 and 600 pounds. So he needed his tractor for something, and he parked his tractor under the shed where the calves got out of the weather. So he didn't have no gas well. He had an open top 5-gallon bucket, and back in we all run drip gasoline. That's just unrefined, you know.
Right.
So he went and got a couple gallon of gasoline in that open top bucket. Well, he got to the tractor to put it in, and he forgot his funnel. So he just set the bucket of gas down on the ground. Went and got the funnel and come back, and one of his calves standing there with his head down in that bucket drinking that gasoline. You wouldn't think they'd have anything to do with gasoline. You know, the odor.
Sure.
But hell, he siphoned it right down. Anyway, of course, the calf died.
Oh, sure.
And so Tom hooked onto it with a tractor and drug it about a quarter of a mile down to an abandoned well site, one that they'd plugged, and left it there. Well, the next morning, my dad was a pumper. He pumped all them wells around there. So he had to drive down that same road and by that well to get to some more wells to check on. Well, the calf was gone. Well, Dad got back that evening and he asked Tom, he said, what'd you do? Where'd you put that calf? And Tom told Dad, well, what well? You know, they had them all numbered and named. And Dad said, well, it ain't there. So Dad and Tom got in the truck and they went back down there. There wasn't any drag marks. The only drag marks was where they had drug it in with the tractor. Something come in there and picked up that 500-600 pound calf and walked off with it. Yeah.
Jeez. Did your dad kind of know possibly?
Oh yeah. Dad told Tom. He said it's just starting.
So how far did Tom live from your family?
About 50 yards.
Oh.
Close. Just.
Oh. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, it was about 50 yards from our house to his. And I don't know why I know why he hung it in our barn, because we didn't have any cows or nothing in the barn. Well, he had calves in his barn, so.
Well, they drug it to the house. It was on the ground for a while. That's when you observed it.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit, did you have any siblings that also observed it or friends?
Yes, my brother and my sister. And like I say, my dad was a pumper. Well, a pumper, they go around and clean the wells and the excess oil and stuff, so they've always got the company furnishing them a big box of rags, wiping rags.
Okay.
Well, me and my brother, Dad would go squirrel hunting, and me and my brother would take them rags and tear them up and put bandages on them squirrels where he'd shot them, you know, that was just our thing.
Oh, sure.
So we got into that box of rags and we went to putting bandages on that booger.
Playing doctor.
Yeah.
How old were you at that time?
I was born in 1941 in May.
So this was in 49.
And so it was in November when they shot it. So I was, I don't know, probably 9 years old, maybe just a hair over 9 years old. Or maybe a hair before 9, I don't know.
So were you older than your siblings?
Yes, I was the oldest.
So you guys were playing doctor with this.
Yeah.
Do you think the size of this booger, this Bigfoot, it was an adolescent?
Yes.
A child?
Yes. And Dad said that's why we was going to have so much trouble, because it was a young one. He said if it had been a full-grown adult, it would have been a different story. But being a young one, they wanted retaliation, and they got it, you know.
So tell me a little bit of what you observed with this booger on the ground, this Bigfoot, dead Bigfoot, and you and your siblings were playing doctor with it. Tell me a little bit about the details of this dead Bigfoot on the ground. Okay,
we start from the head and go down. It had a kind of a cone-shaped head. It had a ridge down it, which wasn't much, but it had a ridge. And it had ears, had little bitty ears. You had to move the hair back to see the ears. That's how small the ears was. But it was so much human-like. It wasn't nothing like a monkey at all. Its eyes, the pupil of its eyes was about the size of a quarter, and they was black. There wasn't any white. And that was real weird, you know.
Oh, I'm sure.
Out of everything on it, that was what got our attention, was the eyes, because it always looked like it was looking at you, you know, with no
its eyes
whites.
were still open?
Yeah, the eyes were still open, yeah.
Oh, my.
So, anyway, it didn't have much hair on its face. And like I say, the eyes was black. And I don't know whether it had any canines or not. I don't remember that. But I do remember looking at its teeth, and we was sticking our finger in its mouth and stuff. And of course, its teeth was more, they was bigger than ours. And they was blocked off, kind of square.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So you didn't see, like you said, you didn't see any sharp canines?
Yeah, I didn't see it. They could have been, and I just don't remember. But I don't remember any canines.
Okay.
I'm sure it had them, but apparently they wasn't big or stuck out, you know, we would have noticed that. And the rest of it was extremely hairy. Around his backside where he'd been sitting under those persimmon trees, they had stuck to him, and his hair was all matted on his butt where he'd been sitting in them persimmons. And his hands was just like ours. His arms seemed skinny for his size. They was long, and they seemed skinny. They wasn't real muscular, you know. And his fingers was a lot longer than our fingers, and the fingernails wasn't like claws. They come out and kind of rolled over the edge. And the fingernails was black, and the skin on it was a gray.
A gray skin.
Yeah, and the fur was more brown than red, but it had a red cast to it.
Okay.
And its feet was just like our feet, only the bottoms didn't have no hair. The top of the foot and the side of the foot and legs and all that all had hair on it, and it was about 3 inches long, the hair was. And the arms was longer than the legs.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I was thinking about it last night, and the arms was longer than the legs. And it stretched out, it was probably, hanging from the rafters, it was probably 6 to 7 feet in length. I'd say probably more like 7 feet. But it was real, hanging up there, it was real weird looking because the arms was so long and the legs was so short.
How much do you estimate it weighed, do you think?
Well, my dad's bird dog, she was real fat. She weighed 96 pounds. And that Booger was about the same weight. I'd say close to 100 pounds.
Oh, so for that height, it was really quite thin. So
yeah, it was thin.
If it wasn't diseased or anything like that, then it probably was an adolescent or a youth.
Yeah, and being that time of the year, there's not a whole lot of food. You know, not like it would be in the spring or the summer.
Right.
And of course, those persimmons was ripe, and that part of the country up there, I don't know about now, but it was just one persimmon thicket after another. And of course, there was plenty of that to eat. And since that calf had disappeared, well, where we lived was open range. That means that you can run your cows anywhere unless if you don't want people's cows in your front yard, you fenced off your front yard. And that's what most people do. They just fenced off the front yard, and your cows might wind up 10 miles away. You know, it's just
Sure.
And they had signs out on the road telling you it was open range, watch for cattle. And it was that way probably, I don't know, probably the middle 50s. And then they started fencing because right a half a mile north of where all of this happened, my dad bought 40 acres of land, and we went to raising pheasants. So Dad was selling pheasants. We'd dress them out, and he'd sell them to the restaurants over in Oklahoma City and Tulsa and all around. And he made good money at selling the pheasants, you know, pheasants and quail.
So when you were observing, you said the skin color was kind of a gray. Did it have a brow ridge?
Yeah. The eyes was kind of sunk back a little bit, and its nose was just like ours, only it was a little bit flat. But the holes where you breathed through, they wasn't out front; they was down just like ours.
So it wasn't like a gorilla. It was
No, it was like our nose, only
flat,
it was just
kind
flat.
of an aboriginal type of nose.
Yeah. And
was there any smell to this?
All you could smell was persimmons and blood.
Okay. Did he shoot it in the chest or?
He shot it under the arm.
Under the arm.
Yeah, apparently it was holding on, and he hit it under the arm with that 12-gauge shotgun.
Well, I'm sure there's not.
He probably wasn't 10 foot away. It'd be just like shooting him with a slug.
Oh yeah,
And
there wouldn't be much to survive that.
No, and they was blood everywhere. I mean, just it was gory.
Yeah.
But us kids, hell, the bloodier it was, the better it was.
You live out in the country, you don't think twice about it because you're used to seeing deer.
Well, we're used to butchering hogs, you know, and so we was used to blood, you know. It wasn't no big deal.
So you're observing this, and you guys are playing doctor with this dead Bigfoot. This is prior to it being hung in the barn.
Yes.
And now, this was in 49.
Yeah.
And was there any, cameras were an expensive commodity back then.
Yeah.
And so not everybody had a camera. Yeah. Was there any pictures taken of this by chance?
There was a lady come down with a camera.
Oh, there was.
Yeah, and she took pictures of it. Well, me and my brother kept trying to get in a picture, you know, and she kept telling us, get out of the way, you know.
Was she from a newspaper, or was she just...
No, I don't know where. She just showed up, you know.
It'd been something to see those right now.
Yeah, and my dad asked Tom, he said, do you know her? And Tom said, no, I ain't never seen her before, so... and being a woman, she was the only woman that ever come and looked at it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Now that's fascinating.
Yeah, well, see, word got out at the refinery, and the only women working at the refinery might have been secretaries, you know.
Right.
And, of course, Dad knew all them, and Tom knew all them. And just word got out, and they would be 4 or 5 guys that could get away from their job. They'll jump in one car and run over and look at it and then go back to the refinery. And they done that all day long. So I don't know how many people wound up seeing it.
And this was in a period of 2-3 days, you said?
No, 1 day.
1 day?
Yeah, we shot it. I say we shot it. Tom shot it that morning. People didn't start showing up till about noon.
Now, how'd they find out about this?
Tom told them.
Oh.
Tom had to go back to the refinery to do something, you know, and he told somebody there, and then word spread like wildfire. And so it was only probably a period of 5 to 6 hours is all people could see it. It got dark, and that was it, you know. People quit coming. So everybody back then thought it was a monkey, you know.
Well, yeah.
Because they just hadn't experienced, you know.
Anything like this.
Yeah, no, they just thought it was a big monkey, you know.
Yeah, the popularity of what is now,
Yeah.
the terms Bigfoot, Sasquatch, is much more prevalent now, of course, with the internet and just everything over the decades. But back then, I can only imagine that when people, I'm sure Tom and your family, you weren't the first at that time. I mean, that occurred in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And Kiefer is not that big of a community. It still isn't.
No.
I've been to Kiefer many times. It's just outside of Tulsa.
Yeah.
And it's I'm sure when people had problems with them, they probably called them. They maybe went by a different name besides boogers. They probably called them wood apes or wood monkeys or something like that at the time. I can only imagine the stories that never got told.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people wouldn't. They'd have an encounter and they wouldn't say nothing about it. Because they thought, well, I don't want them thinking I'm nuts, So
Exactly.
A lot of people
that was a
just,
generation that, not to say that age groups nowadays will, they can keep quiet too, but that was a generation where you just didn't say much because you didn't want it out in the community, just what you said.
Yeah.
You don't want people thinking you're little nuts, and so you just kind of kept it in close circles.
Yeah.
With this story, what was fascinating to me is that you guys were physically touching this Bigfoot.
Yeah.
And, as kids, we're told many times that monsters don't exist.
Yeah.
That, because kids have nightmares when they're growing up, and, mom and dad check into the closet and under the bed. And here, did it look like a monster to you? What did you think in your mind's eye?
No, we was tickled to death to get to see it and get to play with it. It is forced thinking, looking at it and thinking, that's a monster. Well, we didn't see it that way. And we'd never heard about boogers. That's the first time we didn't even know what it was, Wow. And it didn't scare us. No, we welcomed getting to play with it. And, that was the biggest thing, hell, we ever got to put bandages on. But anyway, that led up to where when I was an adult and went to seeing them, it didn't freak me out, because I knew what there was.
So did you have any more occurrences? Did Tom have any more issues after that cow, after you drug it out there and took your dad and it was gone?
No, because about 6 months after that, we moved from that house a mile over a ridge to another company house. And we lived there for maybe 2 years. About 2 years. And then we lost some chickens. We didn't lose no more goats, but we had some chickens pancaked because that Booger clan, they just, because I'd found tracks outside of Sapulpa there on Polecat Creek. On 117, there's some bluffs south of 117 on Polecat, and we'd go over as teenagers and rappel up and down those bluffs, and we found tracks over there.
You did?
Yeah. And that would have been maybe 2 miles from where that young one got shot.
So when you guys moved, Tom also?
No, Tom stayed there.
He did? Did he have any more issues?
I don't know, because we lost track of him because we didn't live next door to him, and,
right.
And we had new friends and neighbors, and so.
And that property, I asked you if that was, what you've already said, it wasn't property in the family. This was oil field.
Yeah, it belonged to the Texas company. Yeah.
So, as you're aware of right now, it's that house and barn you said got.
Yeah, they tore the refinery down. They busted up all the concrete, hauled it all off, buried it. You can't tell if there's ever been a refinery there.
And the barn and the house that you guys were in are probably also.
They're all gone.
Okay.
All of them's gone. Because I come by there about, once every 3 or 4 months, because it's a shortcut for me to get to my house. All of it was all of the occurrences was right off that blacktop road.
And that creek, I know exactly the creek you're talking about. I used to cross it many times in a week, Polk Creek.
Yeah.
Going into Sapulpa.
Yeah.
That was the primary water source in that area?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, that was it. Yeah, there wasn't nothing else.
At that time.
No other waters. I can remember back when 117 was a one-lane dirt road. You know, that's the road, the highway that goes from Sapulpa over to the B line.
Yeah.
And it was just a one-lane dirt road.
Wow. Yeah, it's a busy thoroughfare now.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's a big thing. And that 40 acres that Dad, after we moved from the second place, that's when Dad bought the 40 acres. And the 40 acres was like a mile and a half from where Tom had shot that booger. So the booger knew we was there. They just didn't bother us no more.
So after you moved, you said that you still had pancaking of the chickens.
Yeah.
And now when you said the pancaking, they really wouldn't eat them. They just
No,
step on them.
they didn't. They would just put their foot down on them and just squash them. Yeah, they'd be big as dinner plates.
So your dad had some level of knowledge when he told Tom, after Tom shot this adolescent out of the tree, and your dad sounded like he kind of scolded Tom a little bit.
Oh, he did.
So your dad had some level of knowledge to say you shouldn't have done that because we're going to have problems.
Yeah.
I wonder how your dad knew that.
Well, Dad was born and raised down in McCurtain, Oklahoma, and which is just a little bitty town, you know, and the whole town thrived around lumber. That's I don't know, I called her my aunt. It was my dad's stepsister. Yeah, Dad's stepsister. Her and her husband owned the lumber mill there in town where they processed the lumber. Well, Dad worked there part-time, and part of the time he'd work out in the woods, out in the lumber camp. And he was raised, he said he'd see them 2 or 3 times a week when they was out in the woods, and that's how he learned about them. And he said as long as you didn't bother them, they didn't bother you. It was just an old hat thing to them, you know. They seen them all the time.
Well, let's get into that because you know when we spoke initially on the phone, you went through a lot of encounters and sightings that for just that one encounter of that dead Bigfoot, that would be enough of a lifetime. But you had other accounts, quite a few accounts that. One of my reasons why for being here, because I wanted to get this documented. So if you don't mind, let's talk about your dad. You know, he grew up in McCurtain County.
Yeah.
What town was it again? In McCurtain County, as I told you, is the county that we had experiences, my brothers and I, my family.
Yeah.
So go into that with your dad growing up there, and even as working in that area, kind of what he experienced as he would relay it to you and tell you.
Well, he told us about, I guess just to prove how dangerous they was. One of the guys at the logging camp was a cook. And from the way I understand it, on the weekends they'd all go to town and stay in town, and then on the week they would work out in the camp. Monday, I guess it was, they come back from camp, and one of the boogers down there had been getting in the tent. They lived in tents, and he'd get in a tent and get into food. And he was stealing their bacon and hams and stuff, you know. So he seen one, and he shot it. He shot it with a rifle. I don't know what kind of rifle, but he shot it. So that was in the afternoon. The next day, all of the crew come back in to get the evening meal. Well, there wasn't no evening meal and there wasn't no cook. So they went to looking for him, and they found him a little ways out there with a tree on top of him. So the Bigfoot he shot had come back and killed him. He dropped a tree on him and killed him. So Dad said he was giving us, for instance, on the retaliation at how bad they could do it, you know, that they was capable of it.
He killed the Bigfoot or wounded it?
Wounded it.
He wounded it, and they think that that wounded one came back to it.
Yeah, most of the guns back then wasn't big enough to kill a Bigfoot. A lot of them still today ain't big enough. It's all about shot placement. So anyway, that's about all I can remember on that part of it.
So the cook was basically a cook for the loggers.
Yes.
And they kind of stayed out there in the timber.
Yes.
And to be close to work.
Yeah.
And that's what it was. So when people would leave, he'd just be by himself out there.
Yes.
Preparing, getting ready for the loggers to come in for a meal.
Yeah, that's all he done was cook. He didn't work in the timber. That's all he done. He'd cook, you know.
So they found him with a log on him.
Yeah, a tree on him. Yeah.
When was he with a group that actually found the guy, or he was just told that that's what
he didn't say.
He relayed this.
Yeah, he just relayed it to me. Like, he didn't say whether he'd found him or not. You know, they just found him. He said, "We found him," and that's. So I don't know whether Dad was by himself or he was probably with some more men. You know, but. That was, from the way I can figure it, that was about 19 and 22. 22 to maybe 26. Because the way I come up with that is Dad was still a teenager then. And I was going from the time Dad was born to, you know, like 17, 18 years old.
Okay.
But...
well, you went into, your dad did this for a number of years, driving logging trucks.
Yeah.
That part, and you know, back where he was at, and where, you know, I'm sure there was much more acreage.
Yeah.
Than what there is now, and it was, you know, very, very rugged, woolly.
Yeah.
I mean,
very few houses.
Very few houses, and very few parts of that land that anybody had ever walked, probably.
Yeah.
So. You said that your dad, over the years in driving those trucks, it was a very, very common occurrence to see these Bigfoot.
Yeah.
Go into that if you want.
Well, he said they'd see him 2 or 3 times a week. And a lot of times, like I say, when Dad when they didn't need him in the timber, he was driving the truck hauling the logs from the field to the mill. And he had a lot of encounters driving the truck, and he'd see them. But he said if you didn't mess with them or give them no trouble, they wouldn't give you no trouble. And you asked me the last time that we done an interview what I thought they was, and I told you I thought they was an animal. But since then, I've changed my mind. They're a being. They're a person. They're extremely intelligent, and they're just a form of a being, you know.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because, you know, that's the thing that's kind of in some level of, I don't want to say debate, but, you know, I hear this discussion a lot online, is there's a lot of different conversations going on regarding these Bigfoot, Sasquatch. You know, are they a creature, which to me is just a broad definition of something that is not indigenous, something that's not we're used to seeing. And creature could encompass a lot of different things, but also I call it a creature being. It's a being, meaning it has a level of awareness of its own demise. It has a language. It is.
Plus, it's got our DNA, or we've got its DNA. Whichever way you want to look at it.
Yeah, I mean that's another discussion right
Yeah.
there, and I know a lot of people that may rub them a little bit wrong here and there
Yeah.
because we just don't know.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And now I feel that some people know
Yes.
that
Yeah.
have very expensive laboratory equipment,
Yeah.
and they can look at this. In fact, there was Brother Bill. We did a series on Dr. Melba Ketchum, and she was a geneticist, and she still is.
Yeah.
And she did a fantastic job on some analysis,
Yeah.
blood analysis regarding these.
Yeah, she done over 1,200.
And she did it correct, and she did it very, very well.
Yeah.
And sent these specimens off to university laboratories. And she did not use her own data.
Yeah.
She used their data
Yeah.
as to not be ridiculed as if she was skewing her own results. So the testing, the analysis that she came up with was right. She did it very well. She did it correctly using the scientific method.
Yeah.
And that I understand after reading her work, by the time the universities said, well, they submitted the data back to her,
Yeah.
this was something that they don't have in their database. It
Yeah.
did not match any known animal on this planet. And when she said this was of a Bigfoot, this new creature, they kind of just shut their mouth and just
Yep.
kind of wiped their hands clean, and that they just said no more comment.
Yeah, we don't want nothing to do
We don't
with
want
it.
anything to do with that.
That's right.
But her testing was extremely well done,
Yeah.
and there was no loopholes. Everything was tight. It's very interesting you call it a being there, because it has a level of intelligence that when you're comparing a man out in the woods and this being, this Bigfoot out in the woods, I honestly don't think there's a comparison. I think these beings are extremely more intelligent in the woods than we are, for sure.
That's no doubt about that.
I mean, we have to navigate. We can't use just our bare hands to run down a deer.
Yeah, you throw us out there today, we might make 30 days, and then you're going to starve to death.
Well, you got this present day show now, and I kind of watch it incessantly at times. It's called Alone.
Yeah, I
And
watch
these
it all the
drop
time.
off at various places on the planet that are very remote and rugged.
Yeah.
And these people, I think at best,
About
like
60 days is about it. Yeah.
But you think of these Bigfoot that they don't have a bow, they don't have a gun, they just have what they're born with,
Yep.
and they have to hunt, live, survive, and navigate.
Yeah.
And it's quite impressive when you think of
Yeah.
what they can do and have done
Yeah.
to survive. Getting back to your dad driving these roads. Now, for people to understand what your dad did for a living, your dad was a truck driver, a logger,
Yeah.
and they would have this huge moving equipment. They would cut the logs and have the
Yeah.
lumber guys cut the logs, chainsaw.
Yeah.
Then they would take the limb boughs off of them.
Yep.
Then they would lift these up onto the logging trucks. And,
Yeah.
and these logging roads are a gravel, dirt,
One lane road.
one lane, very
Yeah.
narrow, and you're literally in a very, very remote area,
Yeah.
just trees all around you.
Yeah.
Mountains and trees down in McCurtain County. We don't have mountains like the Rocky Mountains,
Right.
like for Oklahoma.
Yeah, they're
There's-
mountains.
They're mountains.
Yeah.
So your dad drove these roads probably day and night.
Yeah.
And you said that he frequently saw
Yeah.
these
2 or
crossing
3
the
times a
road.
week he'd see them. Yeah.
Would they be crossing the road? Or?
Well, they'd be crossing the road, and he crossed a gravel creek, and it had I guess a hard gravel bottom in it. Anyway, it wasn't a bridge, but he would see them all the time in that creek. They'd be down
really?
there in that creek fishing, yeah. So that's where every time he crossed that creek, he'd look for them because he'd most usually see them down there. So
They were fishing.
yeah, yeah. And they catch fish with their hand. That's how quick they are. They can just reach down and grab one before he gets away.
So
And they fish a lot.
Yeah, that's, I've often wondered that when we cross those creeks down there, I always look left and right and I stop because
Yep.
there's a few bridges now that are concrete,
Yeah.
but there's a few places that aren't concrete.
Right.
It's just rock.
Yeah.
So you have to go slow so you don't bottom out the
Yep.
car. And I always look left and right down there. And, when it gets dark down
Oh yeah. Yeah, it gets dark down there before it gets dark anywhere else,
there. Yes. So, did your dad ever say what he thought they were as far as, did he call them a being, a creature? What did he say they were?
He didn't.
He just, he
He just said they was boogers, and he never. He just said that you don't bother them, they won't bother you, and that was about it. And he said you don't shoot them, you don't point a gun at them, and he said you don't point your finger at them.
Oh.
He said it'll make them just as mad if you point your finger at them as you would if you was pointing a gun at them. And they most definitely know what a gun is, because they've been shot to them many times.
Yeah. Well, and I've often wondered, with that being said, Frank, I wonder, and this is the recommendation I tell people on my show, is I've said most people have a camera and they have it pointed forward.
Yeah.
And I know they're intelligent, but I don't know if they're understand well enough to know, is that a gun or is that a camera? Even the concept of a camera.
Yeah.
They know the concept of a gun, but something pointed out front, holding it like that in your hand.
You're pointing your finger at them,
Pointing your finger at them, and that has a level of concern for me, rather than what they should have, someone going out investigating and happen to come up on one by happenstance.
Yeah.
It makes more sense to me to have like a shoulder harness with a camera, or one mounted on a helmet or your hat, where you have your hands open.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Oh yeah, I'm with you on that. But yeah, the back view camera on the shoulders, because the hands are free. He's got a walking stick or something like that, So
I know with some of the encampment, because we go out at night, and I know we've had a lot of things we've heard, and we'll have cameras on our tent. But I started actually turning another camera to the woods.
yeah.
So we were starting to do that because some people on some older shows, that's what they started doing, is actually putting a camera to the woods instead of on the encampment. And they're getting a lot of these creatures or these beings are moving around in the trees where they don't know if something's looking at them.
Right.
And which gets into some things we'll talk about here after a bit on infrared cameras.
Yeah.
So your dad, he how long was he a logger?
He left McCurtain and went to Jay, Oklahoma, which is up by Salina.
Yeah, I know where it's
And
at.
he lived up there for 3 or 4 years. And he worked in timber up there too. They mainly cut oak, red oak and white oak up there.
Okay.
And so that was about it,
So he had dozens and dozens and dozens of sightings.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it was
a common thing.
Yeah, it was a common thing,
Did he ever talk about anybody else that, what did they think, the other loggers, or
Well, they all seen them too, so they
just such a...
hell, it was just, like, there goes old Joe,
They just, yeah.
It was just a everyday thing, it wasn't nothing special, it was just, like you say, like Dad said, you leave them alone and they'll leave you alone, so.
What do you say, what's your opinion for people that make fun of those people or think that these creatures don't exist?
Well, the government is the one that started all of that. As a cover-up. I mean, they teach you a bunch of stuff in school. Half the stuff they teach you in school is lies, like who discovered America? Columbus. You know, it
Yeah,
was
that's not
2,000 years before Columbus ever got here. There was people here.
Yeah, exactly.
But you know, it's just I don't know. I think it might have something to do with religion. I really do. And the government started covering it up a long time ago. And I think the government is the one that started the ridicule part, you know. And
they did a good job.
They done a good job, and doing a good job today.
They still do.
You know?
And they rank it up there with, you know, the Easter Bunny and
Yep.
Santa Claus. And
Yep.
If you're one of those people, and
Well, what was it, 2 years ago, they finally come out and recognized UFOs, flying saucers.
yes, it
You
was,
know, like just
last year.
blam, overnight, hey, we seen a UFO. Well, hell, they've been watching UFOs for 200 years, you know.
yeah, very true. You know, my dad, who has hunted and fished all his life, my dad is, he'll be 81 this year.
Yeah,
And he's, you know, he brought up, you know, as many people do, I've been hunting and fishing my whole life since I was a small kid.
Yeah.
How come I haven't seen? How come? And I said, well, and he was asking these questions to me, and I said, well, those are all good questions. But the thing of it is, just because you haven't seen, you may have heard and not really associated it.
that's right.
Or they saw you, which you don't know this,
Yeah,
and didn't and failed to reveal itself, because usually when he's in the woods, he's always got a
gun.
gun in his hand.
You bet.
And I said, if I was them, how apt would I be to step out in front of you, knowing that a hunter usually is going to do what?
Yeah.
Pull up and shoot. Let's get into talking a little bit of what you did in your project down in that dam project, and kind of what you experienced down there, and give a little bit of your background in that job that you
Yeah.
had.
Okay, I hired in down there it was built on the Lake of the Arbuckles. It was between Sulphur and Davis. Yeah, and I hired in down there as a mechanic. And I was working, they put me on night shift because I was young and would do it, you know.
Right.
So I was on night shift. Well, they put me in charge. We had probably 12 of the big lights on the generator. It's got the crank up pole. It's got 3 and 4 big lights, floodlights on it. So my job was to keep the lights running and the generators running. So the guys running the dozer and the scrapers could see where they was going. And the very back one, 3 nights out of the week, I'd have to go down and put new bulbs in it. And because the boogers would throw rocks and knock those lights out. And the closest timber to it was probably 80 to 100 yards. And I've seen them, actually seen a rock. It looked like he was sitting up in the tree. It looked like a booger. The rock come out of the tree.
Oh.
And it went right at 100 yards and right into the light. Knocked that light out, and I'm watching him do it.
So you
Yeah, it
saw
was
it.
just starting to break daylight. It was just starting to break daylight. And I don't know, well, what the deal was, if they was just hollering at me, there was 3 of them. I was 3 of them. There was a big gray one and 2 small black ones. I say black, it could have been dark brown, but you know, they was dark colored. But the gray one was the biggest one. As long as they was screaming and hollering, I figured that's that over a period of time, you didn't have to worry about them, you know. But if they was growling at you or putting out that low bass sound, then you paid attention because they was closer. If they was further back from me, they'd scream, and if they was closer, they'd kind of growl at you. So the growl is what got your attention. You wanted to pay attention to that because I've had them throw a lot of rocks at me. They didn't hit me. They could have if they wanted to. I mean, hell, if they can hit a light at 100 yards, it wouldn't be no problem hitting me.
Right.
But you could tell this happened probably 3 nights out of 5 nights that they would be in there. And I figured out when they was busting them out. About 2 o'clock in the mornings when everybody took a lunch break, the night crew. And all the scrapers and would come up to the barn, what we call the barn. And if they needed any work done on them, we'd do it during lunch break, you know. And they'd send me down to the lights. And that's when they was getting broke out. It's when all of the guys in the scrapers come up and parked them and went in to eat. Then the boogers went to work on the lights.
Why do you think they were upset? I mean, this was a new project, this dam project. So obviously this project was in their area of living.
Oh, yeah.
So this was some...
Yeah. See, not only just building the dam, all of the dozer work, it went on around the whole water level area, you know. But I'm sure they was having trouble back in there with the other contractors. But our contract was just to build a dam. And I know we was having trouble. And I got used to it. The other guys, they didn't know what it was, the operators and stuff. And most of them was older than me. Hell, I was only in my 20s, early 20s. And most of our operators was probably 40, 45. And
so did they see?
They didn't know what it was.
That was causing the lights going out. Is that what you're saying?
Well, yeah, and that boogers would bounce rocks off of their machines, and you hit one of them steel scrapers with a rock the size of a softball, it sounded like a damn stick of dynamite going off. I mean, it makes a hell of a noise. And they would see shadows, and they'd scream at them. The boogers would scream at the operators. And when they started screaming, that's when the operators went to leaving.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah. They didn't know what it was, but they knew it was a monster and it could throw rocks.
They didn't want any part of that.
And they didn't want none of that. So a lot of guys quit.
Oh, they did?
Yeah, but my dad was working down there with me, and we just laughed at him, you know.
Interesting. So you guys were seasoned already.
Oh yeah. I mean, it wasn't no big deal, but still yet. I got the screwdriver. I still got that screwdriver. Broke the handle on it the other day. It's about 3 foot long, and they wouldn't let you carry no guns in there. So I had a truck similar to the one I got right there, toolboxes on the side. And that was my protection, that old big long screwdriver, you know, as if it'd do any good, you know.
At least it gave you some level of
security. But they, about halfway through, when the guys started figuring out that it was, they thought it was an animal, a monster, a wild ape or something, you know, they didn't know. But they knew it was dangerous. And when they figured out it was dangerous, that's when they was leaving. You know, they'd go somewhere else. And about halfway through, we had safety meetings every morning. And they told us no guns, because it was a core project. You couldn't carry no guns. You couldn't even carry a gun in your truck, you know. So no guns. And the last 6 months that we was there, they said, whatever you seen, just keep it to yourself.
Yeah, so, we talked on the phone, and I asked you a question if there was any government people that had come down, and you said yes.
Yeah.
And so go into that from the point where you said that no guns, and then at what time did these government people come in?
Well, the government people was there all the time, the Corps of Engineers. They was our boss. They inspected what we done. They was there all the time, but it was just work related until about the last 6 months. And some of the guys had started carrying guns, and that's what brought up the deal. No guns. No guns, and what you see, you keep to yourself.
And this is what they said to
That's what they said,
workers.
yes.
And keep it to yourself. In other words, keep what you see to yourself.
Yep.
And don't tell anybody else, and
Yep.
don't shoot
Yeah,
anything.
yeah.
So these government boys were there. They had been there the whole time on the project.
Yes.
This wasn't a different group that came.
No,
in and
no,
talked
it
to
was the same group. That's the first time. They knew they was there all the time. They knew they was there before we ever started.
you. And what year was this?
The dam opened the lake opened in '66, so it was probably 64, 65,
Okay.
somewhere in there. Yeah, they opened in 66, I think, is when they officially opened it. Opened up the lake and the park area and all that.
Well, to replace those lights like that, I bet you went through a lot of bulbs.
They was very expensive.
I bet.
Some big old bulbs. Matter of fact, I got one of the lights out here. I got two of the lights, and got some extra bulbs, and they're like 11 or 1,200 watt bulbs.
Did you see any of these Bigfoot physically seeing them toss the rocks?
Yeah.
You did. And
Yeah, I've seen them.
Were they in the trees, you said?
Well,
Or on the ground?
the one I seen, they was on the ground.
Okay.
That was the only one, and like I say, it made a low growl, so I knew the low growl was a danger to me. The high scream, I knew he was out there 150, 180 yards. The low growl, I knew he was between 100 and up to me, because it's totally different. You can tell by that growl. That growl, it means they're getting serious.
Did you ever get nauseous from any of that,
Nope.
that sound?
No.
And the scream that you heard, I know it's kind of hard to replicate that, but was it like a siren sound, or was it just really high pitched, or like a lot of people say some of this yelling or screaming is a cross between an elephant and a lion, and people will use analogies like that. What would you compare the yelling to? Or did it sound more monkey-like?
No, it sounded more human-like.
Okay.
It was a real loud scream. It wasn't super high-pitched. Every now and then you'd hear one that was real high-pitched. And I think maybe that's when a female was in there with them. So, I don't know how to explain it. All I know is it was just a scream, and that was fine. You didn't have to worry about the scream. But when you heard that low growl, then you went to looking. You better start paying attention then. And if they wanted to hurt me, they could have done it the very first night,
Sure.
And that's what my dad and I was talking about, because Dad would go down there. Sometimes I'd be working on a generator would go down, and Dad would come down and help me. And I was telling him about the boogers and stuff, and he come to go down in the truck, and he said, "Well, it looks like he had some company down there, because there was like an hour and a half break between crews. There wasn't nobody down there. And that's when the boogers would come out, and they'd tear the lid, the door, off the generator. And I've had them reach in there and jerk wires out and stuff off the generators. And so Dad come down, and you could see behind the light, You could see tracks all over the place. But you get out in front of the light, there wasn't no tracks. So if you wanted to see tracks, just go around behind the lights, you know, where they could come in on the back side of them.
Sure.
But
very interesting.
yeah, and after I left there, I went to shooting dynamite on the Verdigris River, which is now is Highway 412. I don't know what it's 54 something, but anyway, it's 412. And as soon as you cross over, going east of the Verdigris River, immediately to your left, I shot all of that side up through there, plumb up to the high lines, the cross-country high lines going there.
Okay.
And I shot all that, drilled and shot all that rock to widen the channel out so they could get the barges through there.
Oh,
and
okay.
I'd set off probably 2 shots a week, and they'd probably be 250 holes. And before that was another core project, all kinds of safety rules. And like 5 minutes before you set off a charge, we got these air whistles that fastened onto our big air compressors, and you can hear it 5-6 miles away. And you've got a number of blasts you go through during that 5-minute warning time to let everybody know that you're getting ready to make a shot. And then you've got a clearing sound that it's all clear. And you never hear them boogers. Of course, I'd see their tracks all the time. There was something about the smell. I'd have old powder, old dynamite, and I'd just throw it out beside the building, you know. And then later on, I'd burn it, you know, after the pile got tall enough. But there was something in that dynamite they liked.
Really?
Because I seen some of it where they ate it. And yeah, something in that dynamite ate it. Yeah.
So you would see tracks there, and you'd see
Oh
this pile
yeah,
disturbed,
yeah.
obviously.
Yeah, see, I'd take a case of it. It was bad. I'd just take a case out there and just set it on the ground, or half a case, or 8 or 10 sticks, or whatever, you know. A stick and get busted, it wasn't no good to me.
Sure.
Because I had to have the paper wrapping around it in order to get it down in the hole. So if it got busted for some reason, well, it wasn't no good. And the boogers down there, they never seen one. Seen a lot of tracks. Hear them. Oh, I could make it set off a shot, and right after the shot went off, you could tell where every damn clan was for a mile in any direction around you. Oh, they'd start hollering and raising hell.
Really?
Yeah, and they'd do that for about 5 minutes, I guess. Yeah.
I've always felt, my brother Bill and I, that that Verdigris River had a lot of Bigfoot on it.
It does. Got a lot of big deer on it too. I mean, some monster bucks.
Now that the highways for these Bigfoot, as well as other types
Yeah.
of creatures and beings, are up and down the waterways.
Yep.
Because there's other wildlife that go up and down those waterways too, and there's a lot of cover in there, and there's food sources close by, whether
Yeah.
it be game or
Yeah.
berries or fruit trees or
Yeah. That's why you find them around the waterway, because the waterway that's a lifespan to them. You know, like I say, you got water to drink, you got fish to eat, and then off a little ways you got crops of corn and whatever. You know.
right. That's true.
And they love corn. I was trying to think where we was at. I remember I was working somewhere on a job, and up in Iowa, and I was working pipeline work, and we'd go through this cornfield, and every morning you could see where they had set on the dozers or up on them equipment and sat there and ate the corn, shucked the corn right there and left the shucks laying on the dozer. hell, they'd eat a half a bushel at a time. But I've run into, you wouldn't believe the stuff. I've always been, since I was little, I was always looking at tracks and stuff. And we was the same place up in Iowa. It wasn't too far away, a couple of miles away from where the boogers was hitting the cornfield. A couple of miles over to the next field, we dug up a dinosaur skeleton. The bones, the leg bones, that big around.
Oh, wow.
And it looked like a bar of soap. The whole skeleton was there. And the minute we hooked the first bucket into and brought it out, I looked at it and I flagged the operator off. I said, "No, man, you can't dig here." And so he got on the radio in the truck, and it wasn't 30 minutes later, there was all kinds of people out there, and they were putting up red ribbon around it, and no more digging in there. And so we had to move the pipeline around it.
Oh, wow.
And the reason why we hit it, we wouldn't have hit it. Normally we didn't dig over 5 foot to the bottom of the ditch. That was about it. And they had drain tiles in there, and we was down to like 14 foot, and that's why we hit it. It was that deep in the ground.
Wow.
But they come in there later on, they come in there and dug the whole thing up, took it out. But like I say, it looked like a bar. The density was like a bar of soap. Yeah.
Wow.
So that was pretty neat finding that.
Yeah,
you know?
that is. That's a rare find.
Yeah.
That's a rare find.
I was trying, and when I was in the Army, found all kinds of tracks. I was always had my head down looking for tracks, and
Yeah.
And I was out in Fort Echuca, Arizona, and run into I didn't know what it was back then, but I do today. It was a dog man.
Go into that then.
On the military base out there.
And you are a veteran of the U.S. Army.
Yeah, Fort Echuca, Arizona. I'm trying to think the name of that mountain range. It's high desert mountains. It's like I say, it's high desert. It's not trees. It's mountains, but there ain't nothing there,
Right.
Just desert. We had the AWACS, the big planes with the radar dish on them.
Yes, yes.
Okay, those was just first coming out, and it was really top secret. And when there was a 24-hour guard there, we walked guard 24/7. And I was walking guard one night, and a stick about half the size of a ball bat comes sliding across the runway. Somebody throwed it. Well, I hadn't seen no Bigfoot tracks. Now this is out in the middle of nowhere. I hadn't seen no Bigfoot tracks, but that's my first thought, because I was so far out that a person couldn't have thrown that, and it come out of nowhere,
Right.
So when it got daylight, I had to stay there till like 10 o'clock in the morning. And when it got daylight, I walked back over there, and all I could find was super duper coyote tracks. And they was spaced probably about 4.5 foot apart. And it wasn't just the fingers. It wasn't pads like on a dog. It's fingers.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It was fingers, and sometimes the claws would be out in some of the tracks, and sometimes they wouldn't be, because they got retractable claws. Yeah, they was probably that big around and probably that long.
Okay, so it was a hind portion.
Yeah, the hind, I don't know how the elbow, I guess it would be.
Right.
It was hitting the ground. Yeah, that's how I knew what it was. I didn't know what it was then. And it was just years later till I got to see a track on TV. I thought, hey, I've seen that track before. So why it done it, I ain't got the faintest idea. But there was a lot of antelope in there. I mean, antelope was just thick. And I think I might have interrupted its hunt or whatever, but it was from around there, so it should have known there'd be a guard there. I don't know. Maybe it's trying to draw me out.
Well, that's another story, sure.
Yeah, he might have been throw that out there to try to draw me out of it. We had enough light on it to see the plane. And I think he was trying to draw me out to get thinking about it. He might want to eat something besides antelope.
Yeah, well, that's a whole other creature that
Dogmen will be proved that they do exist before Bigfoot does. And it all boils right back down to DNA. I mean, do we have their DNA or do they have our DNA? I mean, just because we're here and we know we're here, that's a big question. You stop and think about it. Well, they was here before we was.
Yeah, that throws up some very interesting questions that it's always in debate.
Yeah.
And I think you said it earlier, it's always interesting why the government has been quite extensively involved in the cover-up
Yes.
of these beings, these creatures, for decades and
Yes.
decades. As you noted earlier about the UFOs just now being disclosed after 50 years of covering it up.
Yeah.
Everybody knew that they existed.
Yeah.
But now the government's open with it.
Yeah.
So,
well, it got to where so many people, since cell phones come out and the instant camera right there in your hand, hell, too many people got too many good videos. Hell, they had to admit it,
Yeah, exactly.
They had to admit it.
It's the government has been involved extensively, and I've interviewed a lot of people that would call me back and tell me to say, I got visited by some people here in unmarked cars with dark tinted windows, and this is the way they were dressed. This is how they spoke to me, and all of it is basically reminiscent of government tag vehicles. Anymore, the vehicles do not have to be the standard sedan.
Yeah.
It's whether
It could be
it's a truck,
anything.
it could be anything. It's not the standard SUV. It could literally be any car.
And not all of them's running government tags.
That's true too, and that's the thing that's really changed over time, because I've been trying to educate a lot of people, the people that follow the show, that they always will have government tags, but that's not the case anymore.
Well, I think what they do, you want to be truthful about it, they intercept probably every phone call that's made to you, that's made to all of the YouTubers that's running anything to do with Bigfoot or cryptids. I think they got their phones tapped, and they've got the ability to erase a lot of stuff. And like if you call in there and you don't tell them your name or nothing, well, they know who you are 2 seconds after you call.
Yeah.
They've just got the equipment where they can do it.
And that's the thing, is there's no privacy anymore. And when I tell people, if they're going to, if they have an encounter where, because we know that there has been intentional shootings and unintentional shootings of these creatures.
Yeah.
So people will bring them and have brought them down before.
Oh, yeah.
With firearms and bows.
Yeah.
And a lot of, this is a question my dad brought up. He goes, well, how come I've never seen one on television? I said, you won't.
You won't?
You might see one on YouTube or a platform like that.
Yeah.
But either, I think, it'll be taken down if it's
It won't
real
stay up
deal,
very long.
or there's so much hoax videos
Yeah.
intermingled with actual.
They'll just slide it right in
it's
there.
It's hard to tell what is real and what isn't anymore.
That's right.
And because anymore YouTube, it's about views. It's about how many people can you get to be watching your channel, because that actually equals a monetary value to that person that is the creator of that channel. So, I think that there's video that has been taken. There's people that have shot these creatures. And, the thing of it is that these creatures can die.
Yeah.
But you said it earlier, shot placement.
Shot placement.
But you don't want to go picking a fight because, I hear this.
Well, they ain't never going to be one. Even with a dog man, they can be up to 7, or they can be more than that. Let me tell you about Hayburn Lake.
Yeah, please go into that.
Over off of Shepherd's Point, there's a portion that goes to the end of the road called Rocky Point. And they've been a lot of people, there's 2 walking trails out there, and they've been a lot of people finding footprints out there. And me and my grandson and my great-grandson, we was out sitting out there catfishing last summer. Yeah, last summer. And we were sitting out there catfishing about 10:30 at night. And we was right off of Rocky Point, probably 60, 70 yards. And we sitting there, had the boat anchored down. And a rock, it sounded like the size of maybe a soccer ball, hit within like between 20 and 30 feet of us.
Oh my.
Yeah. You could tell by the sound of the splash, it was big. And there's a total different sound of a fish jumping, a beaver slapping its tail, than a rock hitting the water and the echo that comes back off of it. And it was most definitely a rock. So my grandson looked at me and he said, "I think it's time we go, Grandpa." And I said, "Yep, they're telling us to leave." So we fired up and went to the other side of the lake and went fishing again. But
so your grandkids, they know a little bit about these as well. Is it from you, or have they seen them?
Well, they haven't seen any, and they never knew what a Bigfoot was. And I started feeding it into them, and they started putting their head down and looking and listening for sounds that, that you think, oh, well, it was just a tree falling over, or tree knocks and stuff like that. I've heard tree knocks out at Hayburn, out there when I'd be crappie fishing at night. I've heard tree knocks. And now that I get to thinking about it, below the dam at Hayburn, at the spillway, I just thought it was fishy jumping. But I'm wondering now because it sure had that hollow sound to it. And of course the bank's covered in rocks,
Sure.
All you gotta do is reach down and pick one up.
Sure.
And but they're everywhere. You probably can't touch a square mile in Oklahoma that ain't a booger in.
Well, that's something that a lot of people have estimated, how many are there in the state, and it's kind of hard because they don't kind of come to the town to do a census.
That's right.
So, Oklahoma, I think last time, we have about 2.2 million people in the whole state, which is still not very many people.
Yeah.
Because there's lots of open spaces in this state, as well as other states just like us.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of land that is just wide open. One thing that was quite interesting to me is that in this subject, as we got into it with the show, I was surprised that not only are there numerous sightings in forested areas, right, thickets and creek bottoms and river bottoms and lake areas, but there's just as many sightings and evidence on the Great Plains.
That's right.
In western Oklahoma, Texas out
Yeah,
there. And people, that's something that blows people's minds, is that, you know, this is not the northwest part of this is not Oregon and Washington.
Right.
Yet we have them here. Now, come on. You know, some people say that. But there's tracks out there, there's evidence out there of these creatures surviving quite well on those plains.
Yeah. I think there might be more dog men out in the open areas. Done a lot of varmint hunting. Got a ton of different calls in there.
Have you ever called any one of these dog creatures?
No, and I don't want to.
Yeah, they're pretty.
Yeah,
crazy.
I don't. I don't call. What was it? About 4 months ago, over at my grandson's house, I took my new varmint call over, and he was having trouble with coyotes, so we never did call nothing up, nothing come in. But I told him, I said, I don't think this is a very good idea.
Yeah.
So the varmint calling, I used to drive down on the Deep Fork Bottom by myself, 2 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, Deep Fork, that Deep Fork bottom.
Oh man, there's some boogers down there.
Yeah, that's a woolly place.
Oh, 5 or 6 miles, and you take a left, and you put you south right down in that Deep Fork River bottom. And of course, the government's bought all of that river bottom out. It's a Deep Fork wilderness area, and they got special hunting regulations in there and stuff.
Yeah, anytime.
But I think they bought most of that out because it's so heavy with boogers, and the boogers needed some place to hide.
Yeah, that
You know,
anytime you get into anything that is labeled wilderness area, that's
booger country.
That's code for Bigfoot country.
Yep. Yeah.
And that's the way I look at that.
Yeah.
Bigfoot country, or another name is also national parks.
Yep.
And that's code for they're there because there's no hunting.
Yep.
And it is just left untapped.
That's why so many people go missing in the national parks.
Well, and that gets into a whole other subject that
I just wanted to follow up with a summary of what you just saw of the interview. That interview was taken about 2 years ago. Believe it or not, this is the first I have aired it. I would have followed up with the siblings of Frank, of that encounter that happened in 1949 of the deceased juvenile Sasquatch, but they had since passed away. Of course, Frank's mom and dad had too. So there was really no one to follow up with that. But, you know, I found Frank to be kind of the salt of the earth kind of guy, down to earth, no nonsense, but just genuinely authentic. And he had a lot of experiences, and that's why the interview lasted a long time. And I wanted to put it all together for you, kind of as a holiday or Christmas kind of interview special to kind of come back with the channel here. So I hope you guys enjoyed this show. I know it was kind of long, but it was kind of a special comeback show for this 2024. And I'm looking forward to 2025. I've got some exciting things coming. This is what I will be doing full time. I'm retired and I'm no longer in healthcare. So this is what I will be doing full time. So leave your comments on some of the statements here from the show. If you liked it, if you like the style of show, if you want to see a different style of show, I'm all ears. If there's a place you would like me to go, let me know. Also, let me know about I have a film company that I'm working with. It's not my film company. I was invited to possibly shoot a show either for television or YouTube platform to go out of country, to either go to the UK or wherever. I'd like to go back to Alaska to some really interesting towns that are not inhabited anymore because the people will run out because of Sasquatch. And so let me know on that, what you would like to see, where you'd like me to go internationally as well. But in the meantime, guys, I want you to have a wonderful Christmas, enjoy your family, enjoy your friends, and learn all you can. Be safe when you're out in the woods, and remember, we're not alone when in the wilderness. In the meantime, this is Lance with Monster 911. Take care. I gotta go now. I gotta investigate another area.